Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome. I know, we've got the Dwayne Bess, who is great to have my partner back here. Good to see you, Dwayne. Um, hey, we all know how this goes. I want the veterans to show any newbies how it's done. If you're able, please turn your camera on. We love to see your bright smiling faces. Makes this so much more enjoyable. If you are a Zoom expert, go ahead and relabel your name so that it's your name and your organization name, just so we know which great group you're part of. And I love to have you warm up your chat fingers. And the first question is, what's your mood right now? You could certainly choose any word you want, but I thought in the spirit of the topic of the day on EQ, we would share this mood meter. So if you're struggling to find a really lively word, you can take a word off the mood meter. Vicky's grateful. Vicky, I am grateful you joined today. You're going to be a big part of today's show. Kim, optimistic and grateful. Those are two great words. I always try to have an attitude of gratitude. I love this. Chris, energized. Just finished a 30-minute walk. Great thing to do in the middle of the day, assuming it's East Coast. Michael Broward, nice to see you, Michael. Excited, energized. Yeah, how many people are excited, elated, ecstatic? I'm on the upper right quadrant of this pleasantness to energy mood meter for sure. Hopeful and heart-centered. I appreciate all of you playing along. You may have noticed some background music is going on, some subtle background music. That is in honor of our special guest today. The song is called Optimal by someone called Brendan Moeller, who I don't know who that is. Rebecca's feeling accomplished. I love that feeling. Cornelius also optimistic and excited. Hey, if this is a special sort of client and VIP event, but if it's your first time, let us know in the comments that it just say first time. We want to take special care for you. And I appreciate everyone who's just joining. Cameras on if you're able. Play along in the chat. The more minds, the better. But because I want to get to our guest, I want to dive in. For those of you who don't know, I'm Kevin Cruz. I'm the CEO and founder of LeadX. We are on a crazy, audacious mission to spark the next 100 million leaders around the world. We do that, of course, with our coaching, with our digital nudge engine, with a lot of other tools. We also do it through you, working with all of you. That's about the only advertisement you're going to get today, because this is, of course, a community of practice for leadership development professionals. We don't allow vendors or coaches or any kind of selling. Those of us from LeadX stay out of the breakout rooms. And so we're gonna honor that today. Now, it's a little bit of a different agenda, and I'm gonna mute that nice background music as well. So this is one of our quarterly sort of VIP sessions. And in a minute, we're gonna have an amazing conversation with our guest author. We're then going to do a mini panel discussion about how many of you are doing EQ training in your organizations. We love to get you in a quick breakout so you can make new friends, say hi to old friends, and expand your social network. And we're going to wrap up, and we're going to have some special announcements along the way. But let me also go ahead and more formally introduce my partner in crime. He left me hanging last month, but he's back. The Dwayne Bess. Dwayne, of course, is Director of Sales Training Development at Hologic. And of course, I always like to talk, Dwayne, about your other things like refereeing MMA bouts and other things like that. How have you been? Dwayne, we are not hearing you. We are going to let you work on that. Dwayne, you probably adjusted headsets on me. Look at this. Well, now I'll vamp for a minute while Dwayne's working on that. Michael just says, does anyone besides me think Kevin should have his own late night radio show, Set in the Mood with Kevin? That's my DJ skills with Spotify, right? Karen, you're definitely a veteran. I love that. Dwayne, any progress? What are you thinking? We're going to give Dwayne more time to get his mic set. And that's going to let me and Evan remind you about the free resources we're providing to you, including Innovating Leadership and Culture magazine. I just got my issue in the mail yesterday, so it's been out for a while. I think many of you got it before I did. Evan teases me because the first issue, I'm like, it doesn't have enough heft. I want the second issue to be heftier. And this one definitely has some really great content. You can, all of you should have gotten a paper copy in the mail. Let us know if you didn't and want one. You can also download it from the website. Of course, I host the Culture Code podcast where I interview chief people officers and heads of leadership development about, I don't know, I steal their ideas and give them to you about how to drive great culture. And of course, we just finished our annual leadership development benchmark study. That was our last episode, and you can download that from our website as well. More things in our vault and more resources, and let us know what we can do for you. We want to drive your education and, of course, the value. Dwayne, any progress on your end? I do not think you've got progress. We're going to have to do a special green room 30 minutes before the show, Dwayne, because I'm going to need you if I do this late night talk show. Let us move forward because I am ecstatic and excited. We have had some amazing people join us over the last couple of years. I was delighted by talking to Dan Pink, for example, delighted with so many different authors and CEOs and experts. And yet, this is absolutely the most I've ever been excited. He needs no introduction, but I'm going to have fun by giving him one anyway. Our guest has transformed the way we educate our children, the way we relate to family and friends, the way, of course, we lead at work. He earned his PhD in clinical psychology at Harvard. Many of you may have forgotten that he was the science journalist at the New York Times for many years, where he was nominated for 2 Pulitzer Prize awards. Of course, he is the author of the seminal book, Emotional Intelligence. 5 million copies translated into over 40 languages. His newest book is called Optimal: How to Sustain Personal and Organizational Excellence Every Day. Friendly reminder, if you're on this call, you're getting a free copy of this book. So go ahead and take notes. It'll help you to remember it. But this is really to have fun, to celebrate it. And please welcome Dr. Daniel Goleman. Dan, welcome.
Evan, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
Oh, we are delighted to have you. Now, Dan, I want to ask a selfish question. I tend to do that. Things that no one else is maybe going to care about, but I've got you. I'm going to take advantage of the moment.
Okay. Sure.
Now, when you were a young man, I think you were just starting graduate school. I've heard that you met someone who became sort of a famous spiritual teacher, Ram Dass, and you went to India and had some spiritual adventures and used to hang out with people like Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, Sam Harris. And for all of you on the program, these people really became leaders in the meditation and mindfulness movement. Many of them became Buddhists. Dan, you'd followed a slightly different path than that pack of friends. How did that time influence you in your career?
Well, I really I've been a science journalist since back then, since the India days, graduate school days. As you said, I was with the New York Times, and I look at meditation as a kind from a cognitive science lens, and I see it as a training of attention. There are 4 parts to emotional intelligence. You had the first part when you had that mood meter. It's knowing what you're feeling. That's number 1. But it's not just knowing what you're feeling, it's sensing how it shapes your thoughts, your perceptions, your impulse to act. And then the second part is managing emotions. So if you're in the positive range, that's great. But if you're in a negative range, if you're anxious, if you're upset, can you handle those emotions and not let them throw you off? Can you stay positive? Can you be agile? Can you adapt to whatever you need, whatever changes come your way? And also, can you keep your eye on the goal that matters and not be distracted? All of that comes with attention training, and we might get into that a little more. The third part of emotional intelligence is empathy, knowing what other people are feeling, sensing that, how they're thinking, how they're feeling, caring about them. This is really big for leadership. You want your leader to care about you. And then the fourth part is putting that all together to handle relationships. And for a leader, it means, for example, can you inspire people? Can you motivate people? And do you remember to coach and help them develop? That's very important for folks who are in leadership development. Are you getting people coming to you because they want to do better in this domain? That's all very important. So I don't know if that speaks to your question, Kevin, but
Yeah.
yep.
Well,
Uh,
and Dan, let me back up. So it's interesting to me. So the book is called Optimal, and it starts off, as everyone will see when they get their own copies,
yep.
and you make a distinction. You said, how do we, this is really about how do you get into an optimal state? And so, how is being in an optimal state different than being in a flow state? What's the difference there? And a follow up, how's it different from employee engagement?
Well, to your second question, I think is very similar to employee engagement. The flow state, well, I'll get to flow state versus optimal. Optimal came out of research done at Harvard Business School where they asked hundreds of men and women to keep track, keep a journal daily of how they felt and how they did. And what they found was a composite of this optimal state where people are absolutely engaged. That's actually one of the signs. They're absorbed in what they're doing. They're highly productive, highly effective, highly satisfied. They're very unlikely to leave. They like what they're doing and they feel good. And not only that, they feel connected to the people around them. The flow state came out of research at Chicago where they asked people to tell us about a time you outdid yourself. You're at your absolute best. And it didn't matter if they're talking to, chess champions or neurosurgeons or ballerinas. It was the same internal state. And it was one actually very similar to optimal, but kind of at the high end of the scale, totally absorbed, forget yourself, no self-consciousness. And here's the big difference. The flow state is fabulous, but you cannot make it happen. It comes to you out of the blue. The optimal state, we believe, which is just below the flow state, it's engaged, it's focused, you're at your best, and you feel good. That state is a choice. That's something we could get into. And Kevin, this circles back to your first question, because I think focusing attention is a doorway into the optimal state. Forgetting distractions, putting aside social media, what's on your phone, what's in your mind, and being fully attentive to what's right in front of you right now. That's where people are at their best. That's when they're engaged. And when we looked at the optimal state through the lens of what are the standard measures we use in a company? Engagement is a big one. And it turns out they're one in the same state. So when you look at, for example, rates of turnover should be very low, rates of engagement should be very high in people who are regularly in that optimal state. And if you're in development, this is where you want people to go and you want leaders to help them get there. And in the book Optimal, we talk about how leaders can do that, what it takes to change the culture of an organization so that it facilitates that optimal state. And by the way, the optimal state is going to throw your customer experience off the charts because emotions are contagious. When people are in that positive state, the people they encounter sense that and feel better. And if you're in retail, if you have clients in your company, how people feel about the interaction with your people is how they feel about your company. So it matters all the way through.
Dan, you mentioned it really jumped out at me, like focused attention is how you're going to get some of that self-awareness, some of those insights. And of course, meditators will talk about focusing their attention, whether it's on breath or something. And so this goes back to my first sort of personal question. Do you consider yourself a meditator today yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm a kind of industrial strength. I like to meditate like for an hour every morning before I write. My main job these days is writing books, and I find it comes easier after I meditate because meditation, as I said, is training and focusing attention. And it's commonly called mindfulness, for example. But if you bring your mind, say, to your breath, and you watch every in breath and every out breath, and then the next in breath and the next out breath, and then when your mind wanders off, you bring it back to the breath. What you're doing is training your attention to stay focused, to be, if you will, engaged in what you're doing, to be immersed in it, which brings that optimal state. I think it's a doorway in. And by the way, if you want to try that simple attention training, if you're a beginner, start at 5 minutes a day and work up. But we find there's a dose response. The more you do it, the better the effects. For example, people are triggered for upset less often. When they are triggered, it's less intense and they recover more quickly. The definition of resilience is how long it takes you to go from the peak of upset back to calm and clear, focused.
And a good friend of mine is a Zen monk, and he once told me that for a layperson, if you can
Mm.
meditate for 30 minutes in the morning, that's really good. The fact that you're pushing an hour as a layperson, that's pretty impressive. He would be very pleased.
Well, basically, it's like exercise. Like, really, I'm talking about mental fitness, just like physical fitness. When you lift weights, every time you do a rep, you're making that muscle that much stronger. Every time you bring your mind back to what matters right now, you're strengthening the brain circuitry for paying full attention in the moment.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to ask you a question about the model again, but I also want to let people know if you have questions about emotional intelligence, about the book Optimal, or just questions for Dr. Goleman, please type them in the chat to let us know, and then we'll see if we can get to them. Dan, you described a few minutes ago,
Mhm.
kind of walked us through this model, which is the model you used in the book. And my question first is, as you acknowledge, there are different models for EQ by different researchers and companies. Why did you choose this model to put in the book?
Well, actually, this model is a rather generic model. Most everyone, no matter what their particular take on emotional intelligence is, agrees these are the parts: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, particularly empathy, as I said, and then putting it together to have effective relationships. And I would say for leaders, the social interaction is the most obvious, observable way to tell if a leader has emotional intelligence. But actually, we find in our research, self-awareness is the key for leaders. And by the way, if you're interested in helping people know more about emotional intelligence to develop it, I've got an online program, the Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence Program, which goes through the 4 domains and also focuses on competencies of outstanding performers that are dependent on one of these 4 domains. You get the whole picture. Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence. It's Key Step Media if you want to go there. But these are the 4 parts, Kevin, that most everyone will say, oh, yeah, so you started with that mood meter. That comes from Mark Brackett at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. The whole idea of emotional intelligence came from the president of Yale now, Peter Salovey, with his then graduate student, John Mayer. And they wrote an article in a very obscure journal, frankly, in 1990 called Emotional Intelligence. And I took that and ran with that. I thought it was really hot. Sounds like an oxymoron, emotions, intelligence, but it means being intelligent about emotion.
And you've been, obviously a leading researcher and voice for emotional intelligence for literally decades. Is there anything that you've changed your mind about? Something that you believed to be true in the early days that maybe you don't believe to be true any longer?
Well, actually, Kevin, it's the opposite. When I wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, there was very little data directly on that concept because it was
Mm.
brand new. Sullivan Mayer just proposed it years ago. Now, in Optimal, we go back and review the data, which shows that emotionally intelligent leaders and the culture of companies that facilitates emotional intelligence helps people get into that optimal state. And there's very strong data, meta-analyses, which are combinations of many studies that support the model that show that emotional intelligence in people and in leaders helps people be more engaged and more productive. The evidence now is overwhelming. So I would say it hasn't really changed my mind, but I think it's confirmed what in 95, when I wrote the first book, was a hunch. And now I know for sure the data is there.
When you talk about the research, as you said, huge mountain of research showing positive correlations between high EQ and almost every business outcome you can think of. And I've heard of a few studies that suggest the higher up you go in a large organization, the lower the average EQ scores. In theory, the CEOs have maybe lower EQ than the VPs and the directors. Is that true, or and how might we explain that?
Well, consider, Kevin, all of the factors that go into a decision to promote. I would say that one of them that should be dominant is the emotional intelligence of the person. But ask yourself, and all of you who are in different organizations, ask yourself, come on, tell the truth. What is making the decision? Is it the fact that so and so's been here long enough? Is it because so and so has a good relationship with the CEO? Why is that person being promoted? So I say, as you get to the top of the ladder, the other factors may become more important than emotional intelligence. I think if it was up to people in leadership development alone, emotional intelligence would be one of the main factors, but it's not. That's not the reality of politics and organizations today.
Yeah. And I want to let everyone know that you have a whole chapter called EI Training That Works, which everyone's going to be delighted by. You talk about sort of 5 essential ingredients to making sure it works. And one of them is the importance of ongoing practice and reinforcement. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you have in mind with that?
Yeah. So the 5 steps in brief are: first, ask the person where they want to go. What are their dreams? And then work from there. This is called motivational interviewing, and it helps you see what makes that person run and what's going to make them care about emotional intelligence or any leadership competence for that matter. And once you have that, then the second step is to match that with an impartial 360 view of the person. What are their strengths? Where are their limits? Where could they benefit from working? And once they identify, oh yeah, I could get better at listening, for example. There's a common cold of leadership and management, poor listening. So then you need to help them find a particular behavior they can work on whenever it occurs. Like, oh, I'm going to do some active listening instead of taking over the conversation, which is the bad habit. I'm going to replace it with a better habit. Listen the person out and say what I think they said, then say what I want to say. But cross your arms, Kevin. Cross your arms, everybody, cross your arms. Now cross them the other way. Feel a little uncomfortable. That's what it's like to change a habit. The comfortable, what you've interrupted people thousands of times. The brain does it automatically. If you're going to learn a new habit for emotional intelligence, you're going to have to work at it. That's why practice and supporting practice is so important, because these habits change with practice, but only with practice, because of what's called neuroplasticity, that the brain changes according to what you do systematically. This is the basis of learning in school. It's the basis of learning emotional intelligence. So you need to have, sometimes it helps to have a coach or a learning partner, because you'll have bad days. But the key point is that this takes regular practice. My colleague, Richard Boyatzis, does this with his MBAs. He's done it for years, and he's checked, 7 years later where they work now, and had them evaluated by people they work with, and found that what they learned back then with enough practice stays and is seen now where they're working 7 years later. This is habit change. And frankly, for folks in leadership development, I think too much of leadership development is like, oh, it's a 2-hour program. Oh, it's an offsite for a day. Frankly, that's not enough. You need to help sustain the habit change. And the best companies, the places we identified, like MD Anderson, #1 cancer center, the CEO there says, emotional intelligence matters here, and they have leadership development at every level to help people get better in this domain. They incorporate it into their, annual reviews. Not just did you get the number, how did you get those numbers? Are people burned out and they're going to quit as soon as they can? Best people are going to leave first? Or did you do it by inspiring and motivating them? Did you do it with emotional intelligence? So you need a culture. This is called culture code. And one of the secret codes here is develop an emotionally intelligent culture. And in the book Optimal, we describe 3 very different companies. Another one, for example, is Progressive. This is interesting. Progressive used to be Progressive Insurance. Their stock has gone up for years and years now. And I think a lot of it is due to the head of their CRM division, Customer Relationship Management, which is their 15,000 agents who sell their insurance because he says emotional intelligence matters. I want you to get better at it. And after all, we're in a relationship business. This is about having a healthy, strong relationship. And he made an emotionally intelligent culture. You can read about it in Optimal. Kevin, I'm sorry I've been going on too long.
Dan, no, it's a pleasure. This is great with this kind of detail. I know we're almost out of time for this celebration conversation. I'm going to go back to a selfish question and maybe even a challenging question, Dan. I
Yeah.
saved my challenging questions for the end because then if you get mad and hang up on me, at least we had a good 20 minutes, right? So I'm just warning you.
Challenge away. Go ahead.
So you write in the book, now I love this part. Now, these are your words, not mine. You talk about old wine in a new bottle, and you talk about growth mindset from Carol Dweck, which is a lot like the positivity in your earlier language. You
Sure,
talk about Angela Duckworth's grit, very much like achievement, and I would say very much like Big Five conscientiousness.
sure.
You also mentioned Susan David's emotional agility, which is very similar to adaptability.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about these newer terms for these skills. And could you then make the same claim, though, that EQ is really just relabeling the big five? You know, someone who's highly neurotic might have problems with self management, for
This is
example.
interesting. I've been asked about the big five because there are similarities there. However, it's interesting to me, the big five lacks self-awareness. Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
None of
I
the five
do.
have anything to do with self-awareness. We find in our research that if you have high self-awareness as a leader, you're likely to be strong in 10 of 12 competencies in
Oh,
this domain. If you're weak in self-awareness, you might have two at best. So I think omitting self-awareness is a key flaw. As for agility, grit, and so on, I wrote my book in 95. They're relabeling what we talked about years ago. I rest my case.
you're a
Hey, Kevin,
gentleman
do
to
you mind?
rest it right there. Hey, Dwayne, come on in.
Fine, hi.
Yeah, do you mind if hey, how you doing? Question for you, sir. So you bring up this point of self-awareness and it's missing, and I do notice that. So my question is, if you have a leader that's coaching a direct report through this emotional intelligence dynamic and self-awareness is the gap, what advice or what techniques would you actually share with that leader to help that individual navigate through? Because the first question I loved when you said you would ask them kind of like where they are and make that connection. But if they don't have the awareness, it's going to be hard for them to come up with the answer.
Yeah,
So, what would you do? What
that's
type
such
of
a
tips
good
would you
question.
share?
I want to tell you about research at Yale, where they found that if that emotions are contagious, particularly from leaders outward. It's because of the design of what's called the social brain. I go into that a little in this book. I have a book called Social Intelligence, all about that. But anyway, emotions are contagious. So when a leader is coaching someone or directing them or guiding them, what is the internal state of that leader? What are they actually doing? Are they angry? And is the person picking that up? Are they really anxious, panicked? And is the person picking that up along with what they're ostensibly doing? So, what I'm saying is that the emotional substrate of whatever else you do counts. It's not irrelevant. It's what the person will take home from that encounter. So, self awareness, knowing what you're feeling, how it shapes your perceptions, your thoughts, and impulse is extremely important. It's the basis of self management.
So if I happen to engage in neutral, right? I'm
Mm,
engaging in neutral, so I'm not pouring into negative energy as I'm engaging this person that
mm,
has poor self-awareness. And I'm trying to walk them through that journey because they have to understand and be aware of said issue to be able to change it. And sometimes that's one of the most difficult things that they still don't see. It's such a blind spot that even if you give examples, they really don't see and connect to it. And even if you're engaging in neutral. So I was just trying to see if there's any I'm thinking of someone back in the day that I struggle with. I'm like, I failed. I still failed on that one. If I could relive it again, what would he do?
yeah. So, I think there's a couple of things here, and they have to do with empathy. I remember I said there are three kinds: cognitive, knowing how the person thinks; emotional, knowing how they feel, and then empathic concern, showing that you care about the person. I've gone around the world asking people, tell me about a boss you hate and a boss you love. One quality that made them so good or so bad. And the boss people love everywhere in the world is emotionally intelligent, someone who's supportive, who tunes in, who's available. So I don't know what your difficulty was with that person, but one of the things that seems to help with difficult people is empathizing with them. Everybody has a backstory. You don't know why they're in that resistant mood or that bad mood. Can you relate to that backstory? Can you draw it out of them? And you may be surprised by what you find. You may find it's not about you or your relationship, about them in the world that they live in. So I think empathy and motivation may be your key. Good luck, Dwayne.
No, appreciate it. Well, that person, that's in the past, but if
Good
I
luck
could
with
relive
that.
it,
You owe him a phone call, Dwayne. Never give up. Never give up. Just go
I
track
do.
them
I
down.
do.
10 years ago, maybe. Dr. Daniel Goleman, congratulations on your book and much gratitude. Thank you for everything you shared with us today.
Sure thing.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Bye-bye now.
Take care.
That was amazing. And everyone, we normally go into a breakout after our guest author. We're not going to do that. We're going to go into a little mini panel discussion, but I kind of just want to open it up, partly because we got Dwayne on mic again. And Evan, maybe we can go ahead and pin Amy and Vicky so that we can get ready for that section as well. But I'm curious what people thought about that conversation. Dwayne, what was your takeaways?
I enjoyed it. I really did. I didn't realize that after you said it, some of the current work, it seems like it kind of stemmed from some of the stuff
Oh
that
yeah.
he's done. And maybe it's repackaged the other way. I'm like, maybe you're right on that one. But this hit home. It really did because I think my organization. We're a big Gallup company.
Yeah.
We dig deep into the Gallup, but I think one of the areas of opportunity outside of the Gallup side of things is really understanding this area here, because so many people can be, I guess, not too quickly or written off too
Yeah.
soon by leaders who don't understand this and how to navigate these things. So this hit home. I'm really looking forward to the book. I really am.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I was really delighted to get a chance to. I hadn't met him before, and I guess he's at a point in his career. Like it's pretty rare for academics to talk about other people's work. I'm seeing
Yeah.
Vicky's eyebrows raise up a little bit too, and so the fact that he was writing about them and kind of calling them out, I'm like, hey, I got to get him to talk about this stuff, which I think is fascinating. But I think. And he goes into the book. It's what we struggle with at LeadX. I know everybody does. It's like, okay, someone's got a competency model and they call a competency EQ. And then right underneath it, they talk about building positive relationships. It's like, well, isn't that part of EQ? Like what's part of what, and what are you labeling as power skills versus other things?
Mhm.
And it gets, kind of circular. And I thought he had a good answer. Like I'm a big, a 5-factor model of personality is like the source of truth. And I always say
Mhm.
nobody can remember the 5 factors. So it's helpful to have other models and terms. But he had a really good point about self-awareness has nothing to do with the big
Yes.
5. So you can always start there, which I think was interesting. But yeah, I found him to be very very interesting. Very interesting.
But you know what, Kevin? And I kind of expected this, even in the question. And you know, I still don't believe we have a good rubric of still how to have that conversation of
Yeah.
self-awareness with
Yeah.
individuals. Like I like this response, engagement,
Yep.
empathy. I get that, but even then, there's
No, it's
really
hard.
still no playbook.
Right. Well, and again, and what the part of why I didn't jump on your question earlier in the chat was he answered it as I kind of thought, which is from an academic. So you asked the question like real world, how do we handle this? And he says, let me tell you about a study at Yale. Right. So, which was great. That's where my head goes, but it shows how hard this can be in the practical
Yes.
situation. We,
Yes.
so I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but like in this meeting, we're going to announce like big new EQ initiative from LeadX that everyone can be part of. But just this week, I was in Chicago, and I don't know if my friends are here in the room. They can raise their hand if they want to. So doing a workshop for a client, Chicago, kind of observing, and there was an EQ aspect. And to your point, Dwayne, about how hard it can be for some people, we had one person when we said, hey, here's a scenario. How would you feel in that situation? And they didn't answer with an emotion. They answered with like how to change the situation. And so we tried to clarify, okay, we'll get to that, but how would you feel? Let's start with your feeling. They couldn't
Right.
answer with the feel. And others could, but it's like, whoa, for some folks, self-awareness might really be a blind spot. For others, just being
Yeah.
in tune with our emotions could really be a blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think like, okay, like I'm not a very emotional person, a pretty stoic person. And going through this EQ work and seeing how others are, I think I have a lot of emotions. I'm just successfully stomping them down. I just try to bury them. They're there. I just smash them down very effectively. And so there is a difference. But
Yes.
yeah. Rennie, please take yourself off mute and join in the fun.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for arranging another great speaker. Thanks. Great interview questions. Yeah, Dwayne, your question was spot on. It's hard to deal with people that don't have self-awareness. And a lot of people are emotionally stunted for whatever reasons, lots of different reasons. And I think the most effective way I've dealt with that is you just got to speak about the behavior. Are you aware that when you cut people off X and restate an expectation, depending on your role in the dynamic, are you above, below? So some people might never be aware and they might not even care. But if we can speak to the behavior and the impact of the behavior on the person, the project or the task, that's the best bet. And some people will never, ever get there. And then it's a really tough decision as to what level of toxicity a team or organization wants to tolerate before it gets out of control. So tough situations, though.
Yeah, and I love that feedback coming from the manager, or I saw in the chats, the more we can do the 180s, the 360 surveys, any kind of feedback mechanisms should hopefully help.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let's keep chatting, but I want to turn this towards EQ training, which I know many of us have been part of, many of us lead. And we have two special guests, I think, repeat visitors to the program. We've got Vicki Holt, Amy Happ, and I'm going to ask Amy, Vicki, take yourself off mute. And Vicki, do you want to do a little self-introduction? It was a couple of companies ago that I think we introduced your work last time. Tell us where you're at and what you're doing now.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin, for having me. So Vicki Holt, I am the Director of Talent Management and DEI Strategy for Right Height. Right Height is a family-owned company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with about 2,500 employees globally. And Right Height is a billion-dollar company who has been growing very, very fast in the past few years. Just 10 years ago, it was probably 250 employees. And so you can imagine that we are not structured the way that we need to right now from an HR perspective to support the organizational size that we have. So my role was a new role that was just created last year. So I really have a green field to play with, because you guys know how much we love this kind of work that we all do. So I'm really going to come in here and implement a talent management strategy, including leadership development, employee development, including emotional intelligence. But yes, when Kevin and I have worked together, I was with Northwestern Mutual and Milwaukee Tool in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we did a lot of emotional intelligence work specifically with Milwaukee Tool that I can share with all of you. So happy to be here again.
Thanks, Vicki. And Amy, I can't even remember all the stuff we talked about, when the previous articles and things. We're going to go more into EQ here, but same thing. Introduce yourself. You're in my backyard of Philadelphia, of course. Tell everyone what you're up to.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Happy to be here. Amy Happ. I am the Director of Leadership Development and Learning Innovation at Grant Thornton, which is a public accounting firm, professional services. So we've got just under 10,000 professionals that we work with across the United States. And gosh, lot of different things under the leadership development umbrella. We do a lot of leadership academies by level. We start as early as possible in the career with 1-year curriculums. We have a 3-year curriculum that we do for senior managers, which is just before that senior executive or executive level leadership role. That's where we actually start bringing in some of that emotional intelligence. And then we are, owned by our partners. So we are a partnership. And then of course, we have several things that we do at the partner level. It doesn't end there. That's what our partners often say, like, okay, you give us all this development and then we make partner, but we still need to be developed, and we'd all agree. So we are just starting to do a little bit more at that level. So we have 6 programs, but have started to bring in emotional intelligence a little bit more in executive coaching as well. And I think
So,
it's
Amy,
just being more recognized as a gap. Go ahead, Kevin.
yeah. So Amy, let's then continue. So which, there's 3 or 4 popular EQ models out there, companies out there. Which ones are you using? Who are you using now, or which ones have you used in the past?
We started with EQI 2.0, but then we've just recently moved to the ESKI, and we use the ESKI 360 out of Korn Ferry. We moved to that because we weren't getting as much richness. I know EQI 2.0, there is a 360 version of it. I just think we happened to have a pilot audience that did the ESKI 360 and everyone just loved it. So we did then make that transition to go with the 360. That just seemed to be a little bit more powerful. And the way that we've placed it in our programs, you go through that ESKI 360 at a really good, it's that senior manager director, which is our pre-partner, pre-executive level. And it just works great to have a 360 at that point in one's career to get that type of 360 view and get that feedback.
Yeah, a couple of quick hits there is so with the 360s out there, like most assessments, there's often the lowercase I version, like the individual self-assessment, which is a good place to start. It's easier, faster, cheaper usually. And then there's the 360, which, okay, most of us have horrible self-awareness. So if we really want to know where we're at with something like this, it's good to ask our friends. And it's interesting to me that, so you actually did a shift, and it wasn't because of model. It was just more like how easy the 360 was and how that came back. Is that right?
It really was. And in all honesty, the price difference was not that significant. And we thought, oh my gosh, well, let's then make that leap to get that 360. Where the bigger commitment comes in is we do pair it up with, so I'll just say we also use the ESKI 360 in executive coaching. So we might have senior leaders and partners that go through that, and then they do it as a kickoff to 6 months of coaching. What we did with our in our academy with our senior managers, we actually do pair them up with a coach after they get their 360 report. They get 2 to 4 calls, whereas 6 months of coaching is much more significant. But that's kind of where we found the enhanced investment was, okay, if we're going to do a 360, then we also need to make sure that everybody's getting everything out of that 360 report that they need, especially when you do get those results. I'll say it's very interesting. We also track the results over the years, and it's just been fascinating to see the gaps have not changed terribly over probably 6 years. So I think at one point you were saying, like, what are some of your pain points? It's like, I'm still trying to figure out, like, all right, it's great. We now have broader awareness of gaps that we're not filling. So, but that's been
starts with identifying the gaps. The rest, okay, let's come back to that. Details. I want to ask Vicki the same question, but first I want to go back about the model thing for a second, because I tried to prime Dr. Goleman to address this, and he didn't take the bait. So this 4-quadrant model is sort of the basic model, and he writes in his book, so he leads this consortium of like all the leading EQ thinkers. It's the something, I don't know, consortium. And this model was like voted as the most commonly accepted model. So MHS, MHS, the EQI 2.0, which is very popular. We're certified in doing it and all that. It's kind of a funky model. It's a little weird. It does not conform to this, this approach. And so I'm always interested in the decisions around the model. Is it about the model or just something else, which I think is often like, oh, it was who the vendor, was here when I got here, or it's just what we've always used, so why switch? And but I do think there's some interesting thing about the fact that just because you're doing EQ, it could look very different depending on which one you're working with. So Vicky, which one are you working with, or have you worked with in the past?
Yeah. So when I was at Milwaukee Tool, that was the model that we used, and the vendor we used was what Amy was using, EQI 2.0 with Talent Smart. And the reason that we chose that vendor and we chose that model was for the practicality of it and the applicability, because we were offering the emotional intelligence training to all employees, starting with individual contributors. So whether you were a production worker within the Milwaukee Tool facilities, in the distribution center in Olive Branch, Mississippi, or you are a individual contributor in the office, or manager, or vice president, we ran the gamut of all employees being able to participate in those emotional intelligence classes. And we thought it was easy to understand and applicable, especially saying, okay, this is what you know about yourself, and this is what you can do about it. And Amy, I'm a huge fan of 360s, and that's where everything I do from a leadership development perspective is. But from an individual contributor and a cost and a scalability standpoint, that was why we went with the self-assessment model with EQ 2.0 at Milwaukee Tool.
Yeah. Hey, Dwayne, I just wanted to get you in on this too, since I've got you. Like, are you doing any, I know you've not been in role super long time, but like, you doing any EQ stuff yourself there at Hologic? You're on mute, but I don't know if you'll...
Not currently, no. We're basically trying to lay some other foundations first, but this is definitely an avenue that will go. We do 360s, and to your point, it's not as scalable, so they're very, very focused in terms of where we actually do them. But this is definitely an area in which we have to definitely lay some roots for sure.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I'm curious, Vicky, I'll stay with you first on this. So in Goleman's book, his new book, he says he said it a little differently in the interview, but similar, 5 essential ingredients to effective EI training, EQ training: highly motivated participants. That's always going to be your number one variable, right? 10 or more hours of training with periodic boosters, very specific. Ongoing practice and reinforcement. Social support, coaching. We've been hearing about coaching. Support of key organizational leaders. So Vicky, especially when you're trying to scale, some of this stuff is going to be really hard. Like, how do you give everyone a coach or something? Yeah. I mean, I would have some ideas on that, but address.
I know you do.
Well, what do you think about this as like the checklist for essential EQ training? And grade yourself. How would you stack up against this list in the past?
Yeah, and I love this list, and I think it depends on the level of EQ competency building that we're trying to instill in employees, depending on where you're at in your maturity level or in your place in the organization. So where we were at Milwaukee Tool was, hey, it could be any individual contributor all the way up to leader. And it was an optional training class, just answering Kara's question there. So it was optional. People were not mandatory to take this. But the thing that we did about this training, like, we did not make it 10 or more hours. I think our training was 3 hours. But what we focused on was, hey, utilize this cohort, because we always kept it at 24 people or less, so they could build some relationships with each other, because it was always virtual. So number one, utilize this cohort, because they had breakout sessions where they were learning with and from one another in situations that they were in. We did ask them, hey, as you are continuing this relationship within the group, we put it on them to do monthly connections, to work with one another and to talk about, like, these were your specific action items that you committed to. But then we also would follow up with managers to tell them, hey, your employees were a part of this class. Please make sure that you are adding this to your one-on-one conversations with them from a development perspective. And then we asked them to add that into their development plan, because they walked out of the training with concrete, actionable things that they could do, which is what I love so much about the book, EQ 2.0.
Yep.
Like, there's the answer key for all 4 strategies.
Right.
And so I would tell people, just pick 1 or 2 of those items in the quadrant where you have the lowest EQ, and only focus on those 1 or 2 strategies to improve. If you try to do more than that, you're going to get overwhelmed, and you're not going to do it. And, you know, just like Goleman said, to change a habit is a difficult thing, it's uncomfortable. So yeah, and our leaders, the business unit leaders, they knew that employees were going through this, and they see the value in emotionally intelligent employees and emotionally intelligent leaders. So they were reinforcing that within the culture as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad the highly motivated participants is the number one ingredient. And you talk about how important participants managers are involved. I almost say, like, well, if you want someone motivated, make their boss want them to do it, right? That's going to be pretty powerful external motivation. So it kind of all goes together on that one.
Well, and they walked into these classes being motivated because it was optional. Like, it was up to them to sign up on their own.
Yeah.
Sure, there were probably some employees where their manager said, you need to take this class. But for those employees that were participating in that, the light bulb went on, and they would say, okay, I understand why my leader wants me to take this. So the culture at Milwaukee Tool is, you are very forthright, and you are honest with people. Like, we don't hold back. We're telling people, we're giving people constructive feedback. So
it's great. Amy, what do you think of this list, and how do you think you're doing on some of these pillars?
I think we've got some of them covered, and some we frankly we don't. I loved hearing, Vicki, how yours was that almost that open enrollment and open to people wanting to sign up. Where we use it, it's a little bit different, where it's at a point in a career. And we put you through this before you can make that senior leader, get that senior leader promotion. And I think a lot of that's because in public accounting, we're a people firm. We are just lending accountants to our clients. So it's all about people. So we always say that we're a people business. And so to be that leader, you do need to have that EQ in order to lead people, lead teams, inspire, engage, retain. But it's really interesting. So we use it more at that career point. So I do think that we get the highly motivated. These are individuals that are on that career path. They want to get to that next level. So we get that 10 or more hours. I don't know that we really achieve it in that way. I've been thinking about this. We use the ESCI and the 360 as part of a 3-year academy that's getting you ready for what we say, your path to partner. So it's getting you ready for that next point in your career. There's definitely 10 or more hours over the course of the year, but we don't necessarily call it out as emotional intelligence. There's different themes that we have that then this emotional intelligence obviously plays into. But I think we've got a lot of the, with getting that coach that comes after, they get to go through that report. They set some goals with that coach. So I think we have that. We use a cohort structure very similar to you, Vicki, that in this particular program, they're put into cohorts of 4 to 5. It's over 3 years. They switch that cohort every year. But in the year that they do it, there's a lot of things that we ask them to do in their cohorts, even share their results with their cohort members. Maybe the cohort member has a stronger score in an area that you want to work on. Let's talk about it, build that relationship so you can get vulnerable with each other and provide that peer support. But then we also bring in senior leaders that act as coaches to those cohorts. And when we do the ESKI 360, we actually ask the leader that's providing the coaching, that's that coach. That's not the external coach that walks them through the results. It's an internal, we call it an advisor. We actually send them through the ESKI 360 too, so that they can all sit down and go through it. But then they also get a little bit of that leadership support in that as well. So I feel like I've got 3, 4, but not all 5. I don't know that we run sessions specifically just about emotional intelligence. We put it in the context of your role and where you are in your career.
Yeah, Amy, it's a
And the
good distinction because I mean, maybe some people have like specific EQ labeled, content and things, but even around, say, that self-awareness quadrant, you could be doing 360s in other areas, not the official EQ, and you're still driving someone's self-awareness. Or as they're having conversations with their coach or their peers, there's a lot of things that are developing self-awareness. Also, it's not listed in this chart, but even in Goleman's model in the book, the next layer down, he starts filling all kinds of competencies into these boxes. So, there's additional training that we might view as a Korn Ferry competency separate from EQ that he's lumping into, one of these quadrants, which is interesting.
Yeah. I like that.
And I would love to.
So, okay.
No, go ahead, Amy, please.
I was going to say that self-awareness, I was so interested when he was really talking about the importance of that. The other thing that we try to do is do some other assessments as well, so that they can put their emotional intelligence in perspective of what's their leadership style, what's their, and you're helpful because you have a lot of those offered through LeadX in terms of the insights or the disc. And what we try to do is run people through a couple of different assessments so they get different views on themselves. Hopefully it helps with that self-awareness.
Yeah, I know I routinely offend everyone with my rants on LinkedIn. So this is another disclaimer. Like, I'm trying to provoke a conversation. I'm not trying to provoke anyone in particular, but I do die a little bit every time I'm shown a curriculum map and there's no assessments in it. It's like brand new manager training program. And it's right to like content. I'm like, where's the self-awareness? Where's your strengths? Where's your limitations? So, I still love you if you're not doing any assessments in your training programs, but boy, do I love assessments for this self-awareness piece.
You're lying. You don't still love us.
I absolutely do, Vicky.
So Kevin,
go ahead.
For you, Kevin, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Kevin, on this, because to my understanding, it sounds like Vicky, I think yours is more open, kind of anyone can do it. Amy, yours is kind of at that senior manager level. And this is where I'm actually struggling as well. How soon, when is this the sweet spot? Because we don't want our leaders developing poor habits, like they're practicing to lead on people, and then they have this awareness later. Kevin, based on your research and what you've seen, what do you think? Where do you think the sweet spot is in terms of introducing this into on that leader journey, if you will?
Yeah, Dwayne, I think, and again, I know I know this is not an opinion most people are going to share, but like, I believe everybody's a leader and we should be working on self-leadership from like almost day one. And so the only part I think people get in trouble with is when in an aspiring leader, emerging leader program or something like that, they try to say, oh, we're going to, even though you don't have any direct reports, Dwayne, we're going to teach you grow coaching so you can learn to coach people. It's like, it's going to be hard for you to practice that, right? You can coach peers and all that, but the people leadership stuff can be hard. But EQ is a no-brainer. I mean, self-awareness. So like, we don't need direct reports to be able to practice those skills. So this is like a day one in my mind. I feel like the real reason why so many of these things, including 360s, are reserved for higher up the food chain, higher up the ladder, it's because of cost. It's that most of the time you can't afford to give it to everyone. But I'm all about scale, even if it's imperfect. So as Vicky's saying, okay, so she was offering, EQ to anyone, but it was the EQI assessment. All right, I'm going to self-assess and start there. It wasn't like everyone got the 360. Is 360 data better? Sure. Maybe that's reserved for higher ups, but I don't know. I'm a big tent kind of guy.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Before we have Rennie weigh in, I also please raise your hand if you've got an especially strong EQ program or you've been part of one. I'd love to hear any other tips or words of advice or thoughts on this 5-pillar model from our new best friend, Dr. Daniel Goleman. Rennie, what do you have?
Well, again, just in my understanding and all the work I've done around EQ, self-awareness, I think, needs to be differentiated. So there's self-awareness from, I think, the truest definition of EQ, which is, do I have awareness of my internal state and my internal emotions and my internal thoughts? Am I aware of what's going on within me at any given time? Because the theory is, without awareness, you can't manage it. If you can't differentiate your emotions, you can't manage it. And that's the EQ piece. I think there's a whole other chapter of self-awareness around, are you aware that you're skilled or not skilled in something? Are you aware that you're coming off as a jerk to people? You know, there's another kind of dimension of self-awareness. And I think with that, so I think the mindfulness meditation piece, I think that really drives people's ability to get more in tune with what is happening inside. The external piece, you know, awareness is step one. We can try to make people aware, but behavior will not change unless there's acceptance that there's an issue.
Yeah.
So you can't drive action unless there's acceptance. And sometimes people need to hear from multiple sources, which is why 360s are in part good. But until there's acceptance that something needs to change, nothing is going to happen as a result. So, you know, I personally have gotten kind of caught in the loop of the self-awareness piece, but if we separate it into two different buckets, I think it's a little bit more helpful, especially relative to EQ training. So when we're training leaders, you know, we're trying to, in my case, what I try to do is I try to give them the skills to be more self-aware of what is happening with them, and then how can they control that so they can show up as the best version of themselves as a leader.
Rennie, I appreciate the comments, and I really like just how direct you are. Is this person a jerk or not? I want to announce the LeadX Jerk Assessment 360. You just scale a 1 to 5. Is Kevin a jerk? Scale a 1 to 5. You just get your score. Let's just cut right to it. Karen, take yourself off mute. What do you got for us?
Well, loving this conversation. So I work in healthcare, and we've used many different assessments. I've been with the organization for 10 years. You know, we've used the DISC, we've used Myers-Briggs. I like playing with psychogeometrics for real fun, quick, applicable, understandable. I don't know if you've ever used it, but developed by Dr. Susan Dellinger. She's a psychologist, and now she does it only for like Fortune 100 companies. And I learned it like 30 years ago. And it's a fun tool. Okay, so I love that. It levels the playing field because you don't have to, you know a lot of adjectives or be able to read, or, anybody can take it. So I've done it in a room with a CEO through a certified nurse's aide. So, but I've been through 3 360s myself, and one is the WeQ assessment.
Okay.
And our nursing organization uses that one pretty extensively, but they have hired an external consultant to do their leadership development based on that for years. So I personally find it extremely too complex, even when I'm coaching one of our nursing leaders. So I have not pursued using that through the organization. We've used the Center for Creative Leadership 360. That one works pretty well. And then I've been through the Leadership Circle. And that one is, if you're not familiar with it, it's just leadershipcircle.com. It's a great assessment. It's really fascinating, but it is really high level. And so we're looking at providing that to our chief level and executive level people. The problem we run into with 360s, this is kind of interesting. So we originally had this big 360, with succession planning going on, but the same executives were getting continual requests to fill out people's 360s.
Yeah, the time element, right?
They
Sure.
finally just called a halt to it because the upper leadership CEO council did not want to do it anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
The
that is
ones
a
who might do that.
common challenge with those 360s. I appreciate that.
It is.
Amy and Vicky, one last question for you. Back to EQ. Wave your magic wand. What could make the assessments and training programs you're doing now better? You know, how they seem like they're going well. Whether it's the assessment, the materials, the rollout, what would make them better? What would you change?
I know the answer you want me to say.
No, how dare you? That's not any answer is a good answer.
Amy, I'll let you think about your answer. So I'm actually going to answer it from my own standpoint, Kevin, at Right Height, because we don't have anything yet.
Yeah.
So for me, like when we can get a true Right Height University stood up, and we can get like an L&D leader in here, I want to start with emotional intelligence for all employees, very similar to the approach at Milwaukee Tool. And we do some type of a habit tracker after they learn something. But then also do something similar to what Amy is doing. But I do want some follow-up coaching that is being provided to the leaders, because I find that those coaches are just so completely invaluable, similar to what we heard with Penske, I think a couple months ago. So that's what I would really want, is those dedicated coaches for the leaders who are developing.
Sounds good. And Dan would be happy as well with that answer. Amy, what do you think?
I will say, and I'll tell you what's leading me to this response is the trouble spot that we tend to have with a lot of our leaders is empathy. And so I'm going to go to it's the ongoing practice reinforcement, but I'll just tell you what we find tough is when I look at what's out there, trying to figure out how do you do practice and reinforcement in the area of empathy, which is something that so many of the leaders that I work with that they need to work on. And I just find it to be a tough topic to figure out. So I have left it untapped, and it just continues to be something like, wow, if I can figure out how to get that and how to improve that skill, I feel like I'd be onto something, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah, Amy, I think it's like we could do a whole nother session on empathy, because I'm fascinated because empathy requests became like sky high during the pandemic, right? And so it's like the whole world was crazy. Everything's having a hard time. And it's like, we need empathetic leaders. Who's got empathy training? Who's got that? And then it sparked that conversation. How is empathy different than part of EQ? How's it different than something else? And of course, starting about 10, 12 months ago, we're not hearing about empathy anymore. It's like, how do we focus on accountability and productivity? How do we get people back in the office? Like, well, empathy lasted for about 14 months as the flavor. Still so critical, and I think a tough one to crack. Yeah, it's interesting.
Hey, Amy, for me, when I take a look at that empathy piece, it's not truly scalable, it's costly, but in order for individuals to make that switch, it has to be a humanistic approach, because that's what you're actually trying to humble them to do. So the ongoing reinforcement is actually the dialogue. It's a dialogue, and it's not something that you can nudge or do. You have to actually slow down and have them have that dialogue and break it down. So they're walking you through the examples in which they leveraged empathy and how they felt, because remember, they're trying to actually have that connection, that emotional connection. So it's all about that. Once again, it's not costly. I mean, it's costly, but the only way to truly, I think, see the change I've seen is the dialogue, and you can't replicate that in some digital format.
Yeah, it's an interesting take.
Yeah. It's not a virtual session that you attend and then off you go.
Yeah.
Lisa, I'm going to try to come back to you in a second with an eye on the clock. I do want to announce, so many of you know that the LeadX Chief People Scientist is Dr. Travis Bradbury, co-founder of Talent Smart, co-author of Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Our own Evan Watkins is the co-author of Team Emotional Intelligence 2.0. About a year ago, we launched the LeadX. Built in is the LeadX Emotional Intelligence Assessment, and of course, tied into our Nudge Engine. What we're announcing today is all these assessment digital tools are great, but we haven't had a workshop, a world-class workshop to accompany it. we're this close to finishing that workshop. So we're looking to launch in May a new emotional intelligence workshop built on this foundational work. And like we just did with situational leadership and so many of other things, we're going to invite all of you to participate for free if you're interested in it. So I'm going to ask Evan to drop a sign-up link. This is going to be our inaugural launch. So selfishly, we get to roll it out to a very experienced, discerning, critical audience. And if you would like to participate in the EQ workshop, or perhaps one of your colleagues would like to, we'd love to have you. And so more details on the exact date and time, etc., soon to come. It's a little bit early still, but we're looking to target for May. And I see Evan has dropped the sign up form there. So if you're interested in checking out a new EQ workshop, we're going to offer this to you at no cost. Just knowing you're going to give us some great feedback, just like you did on our SL2 workshop. If we have any SL2 participants in this group, you can encourage people in terms of what the experience was like. So looking forward to going deeper down this path with all of you on EQ. I do want to put you all into a really quick speed networking breakout. Evan, you can get it ready because I want to make sure you have a chance. Now, this is our special once a quarter session. So you're all here because you're leaders in what you're doing. It's a smaller audience than normal. So better chance of having a really good peer-to-peer conversation. The goal of the breakout is really just for you to meet new colleagues, expand your network. But we like to give you some starter questions. Maybe what did you find most interesting about my chat with Dan Goleman? And what is your own experience with EQ? Are you offering EQ training? Why or why not? So Evan, what do we think? Can we send people away for about 10 minutes and then bring them all back for a wrap up?
Yeah, that sounds good. All
right. Hope you meet a few new friends and see you on the other side of it. I am not sharing slides, but I invite you to just type in the chat like one thing your group shared, one thing, either a takeaway from the Goleman chat or any insight related to your own EQ experiences. I always like to see what everyone's talking about since we're out of those rooms and let everyone learn from each other. Why can't I see my own chat window here? Maybe because people were not all back yet. I don't know. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. As you re-enter, I invite you to jot something in the chat. One thing your group might have talked about or shared, either a takeaway from Dan Goleman or Courtney just says our group was so good. Or you could just compliment how awesome your group was. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good was your group? LD program ideas, 10s. People do like answering with numbers, right? Evan, mental note, we need to ask more questions that an answer could just be a number. People like those. EQ should be accompanied by ongoing coaching feedback that requires resources. Yeah, big takeaway. That list of 5 things is true and not available to everybody. That's for sure. That's great. Big 5 further. Yeah. 5-factor model of personality. Christy for the win. I could bore everybody for hours with that topic. Dwayne, how about you and your group? Have any good chats?
Yeah, 10. That's all I have to say. 10, no.
Everybody just go like this.
Yeah, exactly. It was a good discussion. I think it came down to one of the take homes for us is regardless of what you're doing and what model you're using, if you can make it part of the nomenclature and the verbiage that people are actively talking about it to kind of speak it into existence, that's kind of what's key. We were talking about if it's a personality model or this model or a social model, are you consistently speaking it? And like, someone made an example in terms of, hey, this is my driver coming out. Like they practice a lot of verbalizing those things to kind of make it real, because we were saying that all of these things people do and they know about, but are you living it out and are you actually applying it on a daily basis in your organization? So that was one of the things we talked about.
Yeah, I love that, Dwayne. I often am, again, being a fan of like the gold standard 5-factor model. you know, I'll say that, but I recognize the value of having a common language that we can all remember. And even at
Yes.
LeadX, I remember like Kevin Thomas and I work a lot on, you know, content and curriculum. And so we're often in meetings, and sometimes he'll just say like, hey, you know, I know we don't have a lot of time, so let's just lean into our D nature and go, you know? So we're not
Yeah,
going to ask each other about our weekends. We're not going to
yeah,
take it personal if we're like cutting each other off, but we've acknowledged like, let's lean into our D, you know, or something like that.
mhm,
Then it makes it all, you know, kind of helps the relationship along, right?
for sure, for sure.
I love that. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to thank Vicky and Amy especially for sharing, you know, your own EQ journey and all that. I really appreciate carving out time. Time's our most valuable asset. So great to see so many people again here. Greg, I just see you were able to join. I know you had a meeting conflict earlier, and thanks for all the participation. We will follow up because I did hear that some organizations block Google Forms. So you might have been interested in signing up, but couldn't fill out that form. So Evan said he's going to email people, or you can email Evan. I don't know, Evan, what you said, but there's going to be another way for you to raise your hand and sign up for that as well. Also, love to get more feedback on these COP meetings. How can they be better? What guests should we invite in the future? Every now and then they have a book coming out, so they reach out to us asking to participate, which makes it easy. But I'd like to you know, hit people that might not be so obvious as well. So let us know who we can bring to our extended family here. I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes if anyone just wants to say hi or has a follow-up question about EQ. But otherwise, I know we are at time, and I hope to see everybody next month. So thank you again.